Om Apyayendu mama angani Vakpranaschakshrasrotramadho balamindriyani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Mam Brahma Nirakarud Aniragaranamastu Aniragaranam me astu Tadatmani niratiya Upanishatsu dharmaste mai santu te mai santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So before entering the text of Kena Upanishad, I shall try to give a brief synopsis, a summary of what we have discussed so far. At the very beginning of the text, in the first khanda, the Upanishads tell us, the Upanishad explains, that the absolute reality is not an object. It is not objectified knowledge. It is an eternal subject. So one may ask the question, how can it be a subject without a corresponding object? So Vedanta tells us that it is a subject without enjoying the status of a subject. It is Sakshi. Sakshi is a witness. It's a non-participating witness. It is a drashta. It's an experiencer. Now, in course of time, the Upanishad tells us that this Atma is Brahman itself. This idea is elaborately described in the well-known verse in the second khanda, Pradibodha Vididam Matam. So what is that Atman? The Atman is an expression of awareness of knowledge that we all feel every minute, every split second in our life. So we cannot have any kind of awareness without that Atman being present in us. Senses cannot perceive Atman. Mind cannot perceive Atman. The tools of knowledge cannot verify the existence of Atman. But that Atman is always present there. Now, when such a situation arises, a question may be asked, what is this Atman which cannot be known by the mind or intellect or the senses, cannot be conceptualized, cannot be objectified, cannot be understood through any of the known tools of epistemology, pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, sabda, arthavatya, anubalabdhi, direct perception, inference, analogy, comparison, verbal testimony or negation. So, such a question may arise. Is this Atman something like Sasavishana, which by itself is an inconceivable, absolute non-existence? Like the hair of, the horn of a hare. If it is horn, then it cannot belong to hair. If it is hair, then it cannot have a horn. Vantya Putra, there are several examples. It is called asat. So such a situation may arise because the first two chapters together explain the whole of the Upanishad philosophy, the philosophy of the Upanishads. It is very abstract, it is very subtle. So it is supposed to be meant for Uttamadhigaris, those who are already sadhana chadushtaya sampanna, those who are already established in the fundamental disciplines of Vedantic investigation, Vedantic inquiry. That is Nitya Anitya Vastu Vivega, Iha Mutra Phala Bhoga Viraga, Samadhi Sharka Sambhati, Mumukshuttu. A sense of what is real and unreal, and a strong inclination to hold fast to what is real, discarding the unreal, then mental and sensory discipline, and a strong desire for liberation, mumukshutvam, and sarvanam mananam nididhyasana. These are the characteristics and qualifications for Vedantics. Now, those who are fully established in these characteristics and qualifications can easily understand the essence of the first and second chapters. We have not completed the second chapter, but we are going to enter the third chapter in this session. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis so that we'll be ready to complete the second khanda and enter the third khanda. So when you are told that Atman or Brahman cannot be explained, cannot be understood at the empirical level, cannot be conceptualized, then one may get away with the wrong impression that Atman is a kind of just an imagination, just a mere concept, just no basis of the reality. Such a doubt can emerge in the minds of people who are not endowed with these qualifications, sadhana, chatushtaya, sampatti, etc., to understand the subtle truths explained in the second chapter and also in the first chapter, which are very abstract. So in order to remove this misunderstanding, the third chapter begins with a story. Now, a parable, a metaphor, a story, or an illustration, or an analogy is the language in which great Upanishads, great spiritual teachings were always delivered. So there is a very interesting story. The story is connected with an ancient mythology. There was a big war between the forces of good and the forces of evil in ancient times. It's a mythological concept. Deva and Asuras. Devas represent the good, the noble forces, and Asuras represent the opposite. So there was a big battle in which Devas won the battle. Now, really speaking, Devas or the good forces could win the battle, can attain victory thanks to the grace of Brahman, because without Brahman nothing can happen in this world. So the Nirguna Niragara Brahman is conceptualized as Saguna Sakara Ishvara in the third khanda. So what happened? When God, who was actually responsible for the victory of the Devas, felt compassion for the Devas because they forgot that they got this victory thanks to God's grace. Frequently this happened. If you are really blessed by God's grace, then when you make a mistake, God will give you a few blows here and there that will make you open your eyes so that you will be forced to remember that it is God's grace that is behind your success, your prosperity, or your accomplishments. So that's when ancient Sanskrit verse is there. Yasya anugraham ichchami tasya vittam haramiham bandhavasya viyogena brisham bhavati dukkhitaha tena dukkhena samtapto yadi mam na parityajet tam prasadam karishyami yadevairapi sudurlabham. Those who have got good spiritual qualities but may commit some blunder, like these devas becoming forgetful of the fact that it was God's grace that enabled them to win this battle against the evil forces. When they forgot it, then God, out of His grace, took the form of a Yaksha. Yaksha means Yajanashila, Pujarha means somebody who is worthy of worship. There are different meanings to the word Yaksha that we'll explain when we enter the text. So, God appeared in the form of a mysterious divine being, very effulgent, very luminous. It's called Yaksha. So, this Yaksha was visible from a distance, but not close enough to understand what it was. So, Devas got curious. What is this strange being that has appeared in front of them? So, there were Devas, there are many kinds of Devas. Of them, 3 are the most important Devas. Indra, Agni and Vayu. Among the different deities, The most important deity there was, you can say roughly corresponding to angels, so to speak, divine beings. Indra was the chief of them. And the next two were Agni and Vayu. So they discussed among them, and they were curious to know who is this strange person, this strange being that has appeared before them. And then what happened? They asked Agni, one of the devas, you go and inquire. Agni represents the power of speech, the power of words. Words cannot understand or define or describe or explain the absolute reality. So Agni went to the Yaksha, and before Agni began to speak, Yaksha himself put him a question. Who are you? Kasmin stoi viryamasti. What is your power? What is the special quality you have got? So Agni was very proud of his power to burn everything in this world. So he said, I am called Jata Veda. So Jata Veda in Sanskrit, it has got many meanings. What it means, almost omniscient, all-knowing. That's what Jata Veda means. So Agni told, I am the Lord of Fire, Agni Deva. And I have got another name, Jata Veda. Well, don't you know me? Then Yaksha wanted to test Agni. In fact, the mythological story is meant to convince even the beginners in Vedanta of the transcendental nature, of the mysterious nature, of the Durvikneyatvam of Brahman. So it is a metaphor, it is an illustration, it's just a story, parable. So when Yaksha asked Agni, what power you have got, Agni was very proud of his ability to burn everything in this world. Yaksha told him, can you burn this straw, this little dry grass? And Yaksha took a tiny straw, a dry grass, and placed in front of Agni. You burn it. Agni tried his best, Agni Deva, but failed miserably, was humiliated, and returned without even being able to burn a straw. Now they was consulted among themselves again. Then they sent Vayu. Vayu represents the power of thought at the Adhyatmika level. At the Adhibhaudika level, Vayu is the cosmic wind. Like at the Adhibhaudika level or Adidevika level, both Agni is the power, the Agni Deva, but the Adhyatmika level, Agni is the power of words. So Vayu also went to Yaksha, and when Vayu approached him, Yaksha asked him. Yaksha wanted to test him and convince him that the absolute reality is beyond thought. So what's your name? What's your power? Kasmin stoi viryamasti. What power do you have with you? So Vayu told Yaksha, well, I am very powerful. I can blow anything, and I have got this mysterious power. And then Yaksha told him, all right, but can you just blow this tiny grass, this straw that was already there, because Agni tried to burn it but failed. That dry grass, Yaksha put it in front of Vayu and asked him to blow it. Vayu could not do anything, and Vayu also returned. And then finally Indra, the chief of Devas himself, he started his journey to meet Yaksha. The whole story is an illustration of our spiritual evolution, our journey in search of God, in search of the highest spiritual truth. So when Indra went, Indra thought, Indra went with a big bravado because he was very powerful, was the chief of the Devas. So he will solve the problem. He will find out the mystery of Yaksha. He was very proud. But he went, he could not even see Yaksha. Yaksha disappeared. Indra represents Jiva, but a Jiva which has some discerning wisdom. When this happened, Indra felt so humiliated, and in that humiliation, he became very humble, very, very polite, and full of devotion. He stood there and meditated, and in his mind, Indra prayed to Brahma. When he prayed, which is symbolic of Jivas, after being fully established in Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, and the qualifications for a spiritual seeker, becomes polite and humble, ready to learn, ready to understand from a teacher, and then follow the spiritual path through Sravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana. Indra was much wiser than Agni and Vayu. Indra represents Jiva. So when Indra stood there, full of devotion, full of humility, in a state of humiliation, then Upanishad Vidya, Brahma Vidya itself appeared in front of Indra as Uma. Uma is called Haimavati. Himavataha Putri means the daughter of Himavan, but here Uma here it corresponds to the symbol of Upanishad Vidya, Brahma Vidya. So when Uma appeared, Yaksha prayed to Uma, and Uma taught him the supreme truth. Indra returned, so Indra became the most prominent among the Devas. This is the story. Now here there are a few things to remember. First, when the first and second sections, khandas, expounded Brahman as beyond senses, beyond mind, not objectified knowledge, beyond any kind of conceptualization, Uttamadhigaris alone will understand. Mandadhigaris and those who are not fully established in spiritual disciplines may not be able to comprehend the abstract truth behind the teachings of the first and second khanda. So the story is given here. The story, in a nutshell, it explains a few important truths of Brahma Vidya. One is Brahma Astitvam. Brahman is real. So the Devas could see in front of them something really concrete, though in the form of Saguna Sakara Ishvara. Second, if we are proud of having known something without knowing it, then we will never know it. Because our wrong notion that we have known something will block our prospects for ever knowing that. That is another problem. Second point is, Brahman is not easy to understand. Brahmanaha Durvigneyatum. And again, this Brahman is beyond words, beyond mind, beyond thoughts. All these ideas are stated and expounded in the language of a metaphor in this particular story. Now we will go back to the second khanda, finish it, and then we will go to the third khanda, where the story is narrated. We did not so far complete the second khanda, but I wanted to give in a nutshell the essence of the two khandas and also the story, because to understand the story is important to understand the subtle nature of Brahman. Now we will come to the fourth mantra of the second khanda. We already just discussed, not completely, but briefly we discussed in the last session. Pratibodha vididam matam amrudatvam hi vindati atmana vindade vidyam vidya vindade amrutam. This is an important verse. So the point is, what is this this Atman? This Atman is understood as the essence of every kind of cognition, every kind of awareness that we experience. Every buddhi vritti or jnana vritti contains this Atman. We may not be able to understand Atman at the empirical level, but at the empirical level, whatever we understand, behind that, there is that real Atman. Without the presence of Atman, even the ordinary cognitive faculty cannot function at the empirical level. That's why Shankaracharya says, Pratyaya Pratyagatmataya Vididam Andaryami Sakshi Buddhivritti. So, when we realize that behind every kind of cognitive activities going on in this world, when I pursue something with my eyes and mind, when I pursue something with my ear, sense of hearing and mind, I come to hear of certain things, I come to see certain things. These are all different kinds of cognition. Behind this cognition, there is a buddhi-vritti. And there is, behind this buddhi-vritti, there is the eternal Atman as a sakshi. Without this, without the presence of this Atman, this buddhi-vritti will not be able to function as jnana-vritti. So, atmanaiva atmanam pashyati. That is, ultimately, behind every kind of cognition, it is Atman, that is sakshi. When we realize this, we also realize that Atman is beyond tribudis, what we call beyond jnata, the knower, jneyam, what is known, and the jnanam, knowledge. So, though we may not be able to see Atman, but the faculty that enables us to understand certain things by seeing, that faculty comes from Atman. That's why Pratibodha Vididam Madam Amrutatvam hi vindate. Atmana vindate vidyam. Vidyaya vindate amrutam. So there are two important stages in our spiritual life mentioned here. First, Atmana vindate vidyam. By this knowledge, by this meditation, by this discerning wisdom, we get jnana yogyata, we get the ability to understand intellectually the absolute truth. And then it becomes jnana prapti, realization. So, that's why vidyaya vindate amrutam. And when we first attain this jnana yogyata through sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, Sravana Mana Nididhyasana, through Karma Yoga, Upasana, and all kinds of spiritual practices, when we reach Chitta Shuddhi, then we reach the Viryam, that Jnana Yogita, the fitness. Any person can convert whatever he does in his everyday life into some kind of a spiritual practice and reach this first stage called Viryam. Viryam here means Jnana Yogita, spiritual fitness. Chitta Shuddhi or Sattva Shuddhi, spiritual fitness. Fitness of our Antakaranas, mind, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, all these. And once that is reached, then Amrutatvam hi vindate. Then we realize that we are non-different and non-distinct from that Atman. And that Atman is Brahman, that is eternal. We are non-different, we are non-distinct from that eternal Atman. It's not that we attain Amrutatvam or eternity. What it means is, we realize that our true nature is Marana Rekhita. It is beyond any kind of change, beyond any kind of vikaras called birth, growth, decay or death, any of this. We realize that we are in our true nature, the eternal, immortal, imperishable Atman. That realization, that self-discovery happens when we reach this level of spiritual evolution. And the next mantra is also very important, very much related. Nache avedid ata satyamasti, nache iha avedid mahati vinashti, bhudeshu vijitya dhiraha, pretya asman lokat amruta bhavanti. So the mantra tells, if we do not make proper use of this chance means this life. So unless we try to realize our own transcendental identity, our true nature, our Atman, our true spiritual identity, if we don't do that, then it is a big loss. And not only that, effort should be made in this life itself. Already stated earlier, in every bit of our cognitive activities, that consciousness, the bodhavritti, buddhivritti, jnanavritti is Atman. But this is something that we realize when we get established in sadhana chatushtaya sambatti as spiritual qualifications. At least to make an effort, make an attempt to acquire these qualities itself is a great thing. That's why iha ched avedid ata satyamasti. If we do not attain this eternal, imperishable nature, dimension of our own identity, then if we do not make an effort, if we completely neglect our transcendental spiritual dimension, then this life is without a meaning, without any purpose. It becomes empty. That's the idea behind. So this is the highest truth to be attained, and unless we try to attain this, life is meaningless. If you make an attempt, then what happens? Then satyamasti. At least to make an effort. We may or may not succeed in becoming Jivan Muktas in this life. Of course, many of us may become, many of us may not. But to make an effort itself will take us a long way towards discovering our own spiritual nature. That is an important point to remember. In spiritual life, the slightest effort itself has its meaning and relevance and importance. Irrespective of whether we succeed or not, whether we accomplish our goal or not, at least making an effort itself has got a great relevance in spiritual life. We may not be able to fully get established in sadhana chatushtaya sambatti, the qualifications like discerning wisdom, a sense of renunciation of the unreal, upholding a higher ideal and a strong desire for liberation. We may not be able to fully get established in this. But if we make an effort in that direction, that itself will make our life meaningful and relevant. Otherwise, it's a big loss. The Upanishad says, Dhiraha, those who are endowed with spiritual discerning wisdom. The meaning is Dhira, Dhimantaka, Shankaracharya says. What it means is, those who have got Dhi. Dhi is the buddhi, refined intellect, that naturally becomes a part of our nature when we practice spiritual disciplines. So, those who are endowed with sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, upasana, some kind of spiritual discipline, some kind of sadhana, japa, meditation, whatever it is, or at least try to understand the meaning and the implication of sadhana chatushtaya, etc. So those who have accomplished in these disciplines, those who are at least trying to acquire these disciplines, they are called dhiraha, jnana yogyaha, those who are fit for the highest spiritual knowledge. What happens? Bhudeshu vichitya. They will realize this Atma Tattvam in everything in this world. They will realize this Atma Tattvam in everything in this world, And then they will realize that Atma Tattvam, that spiritual truth, Atman or Brahman, is non-distinct from themselves. That is their own true identity. Now, then what happens? So there's a word used here, Pretya Asman Lokat Amruda Bhavanti. Asman Lokat Pretya Amrudaha Bhavanti. It has got two meaning. One meaning is death. Those who realize the highest truth even before death through intense spiritual discipline, they become Jivan Muktas. And when they become Jivan Muktas, then they are just to live in the world to exhaust the prarabdha karmas, and when they die, they become Videha Muktas. This is the normal traditional Vedantic concept. Now, this particular sloka, Pretya, could mean physical death. What happens when they die? They get Videha Muktas. Or those who are still highly evolved, even when they are living, they may be eating food, they may be working in an office, they may be Jivan Muktas. So we have the story of a great Jivan Mukta in the Mahabharata, that is called Vyadha Gita. I mentioned this earlier, but there is no greater example than this Vyadha Gita. Vyadha was a butcher by profession. But when he was young, he left his home, went to a forest, and did a lot of meditation and acquired all spiritual qualities. And then he became a Jivan Mukta. Then he returned home. His father's job was the job of a meat seller. So Vyadha continued his father's profession, because that's only practical work he knew for making his livelihood, and he did that. And Mahabharata contains a story where a monk who understood that he has not reached the highest spiritual realization actually went to a forest and then eventually met this Vyadha, and from Vyadha he learned the supreme spiritual truth. The teachings of Vyadha to this monk is called Vyadha Gita. You find. So in the Upanishadic tradition you find many Jivan Muktas like Sanaga, Sanantana, Sanat Kumara, Narada, Yajnavalkya, Janaka, who was a king, Ashyapati, who was also a king. So many of these great Upanishadic teachers were busy people, working in the office. They were kings. They had a lot of secular duties and responsibilities to perform. But they continued performing their secular duties and responsibilities. They were Jivan Muktas. And Jivan Muktas do not retire from active work. They continue doing their work, and when they die, they become Videha Muktas. This is the Vedantic tradition. Now, when we hear this exposition of the highest truth, we may get away with the impression, as I mentioned earlier. When you are told, for example, that Atman is beyond words, Atman is beyond definition, beyond cognitive understanding, people may get the wrong impression. Shankaracharya gives a description of the reason why the Upanishad begins with the story. He says, Avijnadam Vijanadam Vijnadam Abhijanadam Ityadi Sravanan Yadasti Tat Vijnadam Pramanaihi Yen Nasti Tad Avijnadam Sasavishana Kalpam Atyantam Eva Asad Drishtam. So, you can find Avijnadam Vijanadam Vijnadam Abhijanadam. So those who are known, those who say, they have understood, it is not known. And those who say they have not understood, it is known. Yasya madam, tasya madam. You can find many such apparent paradoxes in the Upanishadic statements. The Upanishads frequently use the language of paradox, contradictions, apparent contradictions, not really contradictory. So when such statements are made, ordinary spiritual seekers, those who are not trained in philosophy, they are likely to get confused. And not only that, they get away with the impression that Atman is something cannot be known, cannot be seen, cannot be heard, can be defined. So it is something that is absolutely non-existent, asat, atyanta asat. Such a misunderstanding will come, like Shasavishana, the horns of a hare. Hares cannot have horns. If the animal has got horns, then it could be some other animal, not hare. So this contradiction, even the statement itself is openly contradictory. So in Vedantic tradition, this is called asat. Even when you make a statement, it is obvious that such a thing cannot and doesn't exist. It is called atyantam asat. Tathaidam brahma vijñātatvat asadeva iti mandabuddhinam vyamoha na ma bhūt iti. So people who are not fully trained in philosophy or spiritual sadhanas, they may have the wrong notion. They are called mandabuddhis, slow to understand. So they may have this wrong notion. So in order to convince them that Brahman is not absolute non-entity, but rather beyond definitions, beyond descriptions, beyond words. When you say Brahman is indescribable, the meaning is it is beyond description. When we say Brahman cannot be explained, what it means is beyond explanation. So Brahman transcends all human possibilities of verbalization, So I have explained this earlier. You can explain something only if it has got some association with jadi, kriya, sambandha, guna, etc., dravya, etc. So, and then the Upanishad continues. Not only that, if Brahman is said, for example, it is called abhinna nimitta upadana karanam. Brahman is the material cause, the instrumental cause, the sense of absolute reality. That also people will not understand. In order to avoid those misunderstandings, the story begins here. So we are now going to discuss the story. The third khanda we will begin now. So we won't go through every word because it's just a story, but still it should be read. So I am going to give a brief description. Brahmaha devebhyo vijigye tasyaha brahmano vijaye devaha amahiyanta ta aikshanta asmakamevayam vijayaha asmakamevayam mahima iti. So there was a battle between the forces of good and forces of evil, devas and asuras, and in that devas won the battle and asuras were defeated. So remember here, the word Brahma is used here in the third khanda. Here Brahma is not Nirguna Niragara Brahman. It is not the impersonal, attributeless supreme reality. It is the personal Saguna Sakara Savishesha Ishvara is implied in the word Brahma in the first sloka of third khanda. So that should be understood. The Ishvara, God Himself, wants to show grace, compassion towards devas who forgot that they won the battle against the evil forces because of God's grace, because they didn't want them to be dissuaded, to be misled. Tadhaisham vijajño tebhyoha pradurbhuva tanna vijanada kimidam yakshamidi. So one strange being, effulgent, luminous being, appeared before the devas. Devas did not know what this being Yaksha was. Yaksha means Yajana Yogyaha. It's a sacred being. luminous in form. Puja. Yakshade idi yaksha. Yaksha literally means you could only ask. Yaksha is somebody, some luminous, mysterious being who is worshipped or who is worthy of being worshipped. That's the meaning of Yaksha. The third mantra, the third khanda, Te Agnim Abruvan. So Devas told Agni, one of the prominent Devas, Jadaveda, Edat Vijanihi, Kimeda Yakshimiti. Who is Yaksha? So Jataveda is the name by which the Devas addressed Agni. Agni is considered to be Purohida. Agni Purohidam Yajnasya Devam Muttijam. Yajnavahaka. Somebody who takes our oblations to different deities. That is Agni. So somebody who walks in front of us, leading us, is Agni. That Agni has got this important title called Jataveda. Jatavedaha Jatani Vedaha. Agni is one who is omniscient, nearly omniscient, so to speak, because Jatani Veda, whatever is born, exists in the empirical world, Agni knows, because Agni can burn it. Agni can consume it. Jadavedaha Jatani Vedaha. Jadam Sarvam Veti Idi Jadavedaha. These are different meanings given to Jataveda, Agni. So Agni went and then Yaksha asked Agni, who are you? Tadabhyadravat tam abhyavadat kosidi. So Yaksha asked him, who are you? Agni said, I am Agni. Agnirva ahamasmi idi abravit. Jataveda va ahamasmi idi. So I am Agni and I have got a special position. I am known as Jataveda, the one who knows everything. Then Yaksha, in order to humiliate Agni, who was so full of bravado and pride and ego of his own omniscience, wanted to teach him a lesson. That is the story background. The implication is, words try to explain the absolute reality of Brahman will fail. So Agni is also going to fail. Tasmin stoyi kim viryamidhi. So what power do you have in you? What power do you have? What is a special viryam, special belam, special faculty? Yaksha asked Agni. Apidam sarvam daheyam yadidam prithivyamidhi. Whatever there is in this world, on earth, I can burn. That is my special faculty. Agni told Yaksha. Then what Yaksha did, as I already mentioned, Tasmai trinam nidadho edad dahayidi tad uvapreyaya sarvajavena tanna sasaka dhum satata eva nivavrude naedat ashakam vijnadam yedetad yakshanidhi. So Yaksha took a straw, a dry grass, and put in front of Agni, asked him to burn it. Agni could not do anything, and so Agni was humiliated. He returned to Devas. Ata vayum abruvan vayavedat vijanihi kimetat yakshamidi tathedi. So Devas told Vayu, another deity, you go and find out the mystery of this Yaksha. Tadabhyadravat tam abhyavadat kosidi. So when Vayu reached Yaksha, Yaksha asked him, who are you? Then Vayu said, Vayurvahamasmi iti. My name is Vayu. The Abravit Matarishwava ahamasmi iti. Just as Agni, out of his bravado, claimed his special status as Jataveda, Jatani Sarvam Veda iti. So, the one who knows everything that is born in this world. Similarly, Vayu also, after introducing himself as Vayu, somebody capable of blowing everything in this world, he said, I have this special title called Matarishwa. Matarishwa. Matarishwa, which means Sarvatra Vati iti Vayu. That's a real meaning. So the meaning of Matarishwa is Matari Antarikshe Shositi iti Matarishwa. Matari Antarikshe Shoyati iti Matarishwa. There are two meanings in Matarishwa. Something that can travel in the sky with total freedom. That is Matarishwa Vayu. So Vayu proudly proclaimed his power. I can move everywhere and blow everything. And again Yaksha told him, why don't you try to blow this dry grass? Vayu said, no, I cannot. Finally, Indra came. Atha Indra Mabruvan Makavan Nedad Vijani Ki Kimeda Yakshamidi Tathedi Tadabhyadravat Tasma Tirodati. Then Devas told Indra, why you also return empty handed? They had to talk to their chief Indra. Indra went. And then what happened? Tasma Tirodati. When Indra went there, Yaksha just disappeared. Sa tasmineva akasi striyama jagama bhukushobhamanam umam haimavadim tam hovaja kimeda yakshamiti. But Indra was a different person. He was more proud than Agni and Vayu. He had more bravado than Agni and Vayu, but he had the sensibility. He was sensible enough to understand, here I am encountering with something which is of a transcendental nature. So he became humble. And then he stood there meditating. So that is symbolic of a jiva. When he gets blows from all corners, suddenly begins to think of something beyond the empirical. When we suddenly realize that certain events in our life, certain episodes reveal our basic weakness, our vulnerability. Instead of shattering our mind, it helps us to bring forth within our own resources a higher faculty to look beyond empirical, beyond the world of senses, beyond this world, and we look for some higher meaning, higher implication. That's what happened. So he stood there and meditated. At that time, Umam Bhukushobhamanam Umam Haimavadim Tam Hovacha Striyamajigama Bhukushobhamanam Umam Haimavadim. At that time, a celestial feminine figure appeared, were fully effulgent, Haimavadim full of golden ornaments or golden color, which represents Brahmavidya, the knowledge, the science of supreme spiritual reality. It is the knowledge of Brahman. That knowledge, not Brahman itself, but Upanishad Vidya, the sacred knowledge enshrined in the Upanishad literature. That is that explains the true dimension of this. Uma appeared in front of Indra. This is the story. Now, Shankaracharya says here, so in this particular context, Shankaracharya says, Eva mithya abhimane kshanavadam tattha kila esha mithya kshanam vijajnyo vijnadavad brahma sarvekshitu hi sarvabhuta karana prayokatva devanam cha mithya jnanam valabhya ma eva asiravad devaha. The meaning is, just as what happened to asuras should not happen to devas. So Shankaracharya brings forth the meaning. Devan mithyabhimano denena anugrihniyam iti. So when Devas became proud of their victory over Asuras, of the evil forces, they became fully endowed with mithyabhimana. They thought their power of senses and mind and intellectual powers, material powers, gave them that victory. The Upanishad tells us it was Brahman who gave victory to Devas. That is the language of the Upanishad. But Devas, because of their ignorance and because of their mithyabhimana kshanavadam tadhagila esha mithyakshanam. So, without properly understanding that it was Brahman that gave victory to Devas, they became filled, their mind became filled with the mithyabhimana. And when mithyabhimana comes, then downfall is inevitable. So, Bhashyakara says, Maiva asuravat deva mithyabhimana parabhaveyuhu iti. So, just like asuravat devaha api mithyabhimana parabhaveyuhu iti anukampaya. Out of compassion for Devas, fearing that they may also face downfall as Asuras faced if they become too proud and egoistic. Out of the compassion for them, Brahman appeared as Yaksha, wanted to teach them a lesson so that they will be saved from downfall, which is inevitable if we become filled with ego. Very often, when we interpret everything in this world in terms of our own abilities, in terms of our own skills, when we interpret and explain everything in relation to our own resources, intellectual, financial, or physical resources, what happens? Suddenly, we may be heading for a precipice. Those who are endowed with some sattva guna will get guidance from a higher spiritual power. They will be guided mysteriously. An unseen hand will be guiding them out of this problem, this disaster. So that's the implication of Shankaracharya's statement. He repeats this again. Tebhe devebhya hakila arthaya pradurbabhuva. Therefore, in order to teach them, in order to teach these devas, in order to save them from a natural downfall which is inevitable if they continue to act with so much of bravado and false pride, the compassionate Lord came down and tried to take them out of the path leading to danger. This is the glory of the commentary. Without Shankaracharya's commentary, we won't get the philosophical implications of the whole statement.